and welcome to Crimes with Cole. So how is everybody doing today? I hope you all are having a wonderful morning, a wonderful day, and if not, I hope it gets better. So today I wanted to talk about Sylvia Likens. And if you haven't heard about this case, it is one of Indiana's most brutal cases. They did make a movie back in 2007 called An American Crime, which tells what this poor girl had endured at the hands of her caregiver. So first, let's talk about Sylvia. Sylvia was born on January 3rd, 1949 to Betty and Lester Likens. She was one of 5. Her first 2 siblings, Diana and Daniel, were fraternal twins. 2 years later, Sylvia was born. A year after Sylvia, Betty and Lester had another set of fraternal twins, Benny and Jenny. Betty and Lester were carnival workers, so they constantly would travel. They experienced a lot of financial issues, resulting in their kids actually picking up little jobs to help out with some of the financial struggle. Sylvia loved to babysit. She had a very kind, warm heart. She was very nurturing, very motherly, and in fact, she was very protective over her little sister, Jenny. Jenny had polio, and if you don't know what polio is, it's a viral disease that will attack the nerves on the spinal cord, and it can result in muscle weakness, or it can actually even make you paralyzed. So Jenny had to wear a brace on her leg. Because of this, Sylvia was very protective over Jenny. Although all of the kids did help out with little jobs here and there to help their parents with their financial struggle, their parents were not fond of Sylvia and Jenny, particularly, working to contribute to the family's financial struggle. They really wanted the girls to get an education. So often they would send the girls to go live with family while they were traveling with the carnival. Now let's talk about Gertrude Banazinski. Gertrude was the 3rd out of 6 kids and grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana. She had dropped out of high school and gotten married at the age of 18 to Stephen Banazinski. They had 4 children, Paula, Stephanie, John, and Marie. They were married for 10 years before they had filed for divorce. Once they were divorced, Gertrude had gotten with a man named Edward Gertie. She married him for 3 months and divorced him. They had no children. She later then got back with her first husband, Stephen, and had 2 more children, Shirley and James. Once Gertrude and Stephen had finally divorced in 1963, Gertrude went off to have 1 more child with a younger man, Dennis Lee Wright. And they had a baby named Dennis Lee Wright Jr. Now, Dennis Lee would end up leaving Gertrude, leaving her with 7 kids, and to financially depend on her ex-husband Stephen's police officer salary that he would sporadically give her. So Betty had met Gertrude through the girls' school, and Jenny and Sylvia had gone to school with Paula and Stephanie. After Betty and Lester had talked and discussed, they thought it would be best for Sylvia and Jenny to stay with Gertrude until November of that year. They thought, well, the girls already go to school with Gertrude's oldest girls. They already have their friends here. It'll only be a few months. It'll be 4 months for them to stay here, and then we'll be back. They'll be getting their education. It will work out great. It was decided in June of 1965 that Sylvia and Jenny would move in with Gertrude until November of that year. Betty and Lester would pay her $20 a week for the girls to stay there for their living expenses. A few days after July 4th, the girls had moved in, and the first few weeks were great. You know, they all went to school together, they got up, they went to church together. It was great. It wasn't until the payments were a few days late that Gertrude started getting angry. Remember that Gertrude was financially strapped and depending on her ex-husband for financial relief. And his payments were sporadic. So she wasn't always getting her money on time. So when these payments from Betty and Lester were late, it would upset her, causing her to take her anger out on Sylvia and Jenny. So at first, they would just get a few whippings. Sylvia would always step up and take Jenny's whippings because, remember, she's protective of her. That's her little sister. As the weeks went by, Gertrude found any reason to beat Sylvia. And when Gertrude didn't have the energy, Paula, her oldest daughter, would step up to the plate and finish out the job for her mother. The other Banaszylski children had constantly tattled on Sylvia. One time, they told their mother that Sylvia had eaten too much at the church picnic. So Gertrude had force-fed Sylvia a hot dog, resulting in Sylvia vomiting, and then still forced her to eat that as well. It was also rumored that Paula had become pregnant. But Gertrude did not like this rumor. She swore that it was Sylvia telling everybody that Paula was pregnant. So after Gertrude had heard this rumor, all the kids came home from school, and Gertrude had confronted Sylvia on why she would be spreading these rumors about her sweet Paula. And in fact, Paula was pregnant. She was 3 months pregnant. Gertrude had began to punch and kick Sylvia, and when she became exhausted from it, she had Paula step in, and Paula had almost fractured her wrist from hitting Sylvia so hard. In September of that year, Jenny and Sylvia had ran into their older sister Diana at the park, and they confessed to Diana about the beatings. They confessed everything. They told her that Gertrude is a mean woman, she is constantly tormenting those girls, and that they don't want to stay there anymore. Diana didn't believe them. She thought, oh, you know, they're just exaggerating, right? They probably did something wrong, maybe got a few smackings, a few whoopings, and they're just being exaggerant about the whole situation. 2 weeks later, Sylvia and Jenny had ran into Diana again, except this time Marie, Gertrude's daughter, was with them. Nothing about the beatings was spoken of. Marie still ran home to Mommy and told her. So Gertrude had given Jenny and Sylvia scalding hot baths that night. The bath was so hot that Sylvia ended up passing out in the bathtub. Gertrude started banging her head against the side of the iron tub to wake her up. On October 6th of 1965, Sylvia was taken down to the basement of the home of Gertrude and tied up, where she would remain until her last days. Only one of the neighbors had spoken up, and they called school officials and told them that those girls are getting abused. School officials had rung the police. The police came to the home of Gertrude, banged on the door, asked her, what is the problem? She told the police that Sylvia was simply out of control, that she had ran away. She can't control her. She is being so wild. And Jenny had complied with this statement in fear that the same punishments would happen to her. While Sylvia was in the basement, the kids would constantly go down there and torment her. Kick her, punch her, cut her. Gertrude would go down and do her fair share as well. Burn her cigarettes on her skin. She would rub salt in her wounds. No other neighbors had stepped up and said anything to help the girls. They just would mind their own business. The neighborhood kids started coming over to partake in the activities of tormenting Sylvia, or just to be there to watch. They would pay 5 cents to come over and go into the basement. 5 cents in 1965, that would have gotten you a candy bar. Can you imagine your child taking their allowance money and spending it on that instead of going to the local market to get a candy bar? Oh God. On October 23rd, Gertrude had gone to the basement with her kids, the neighborhood kids, all circled around Sylvia. Her 10-year-old daughter Marie had handed her a heated needle where Gertrude had taken this needle and carved into Sylvia's stomach, "I am a prostitute and proud of it." Gertrude couldn't finish the carving. She had handed off the job to Richard Hobbs, a 14-year-old neighbor boy. On October 25th, 2 days later, Sylvia tried to escape. It took everything she had to get the strength. She made it to the bottom of the basement stairs where Gertrude stood standing above her. Gertrude slammed her head against the floor, stomped on her head over and over and over again. Sylvia lost all ability to talk. She had no strength left. She became completely incontinent. With a little bit of pity that Richard Hobbs had left in his heart for Sylvia, he had given Sylvia a warm bubble bath that night. He had put her in clean clothes and laid her on the mattress down in the basement, where Sylvia would fall asleep and never wake up. It wasn't until the next day, when they realized that Sylvia was gone, that Richard phoned the police. When the police arrived, they had arrested Paula and Gertrude, and Jenny had told them, "If you get me out of here, I'll tell you everything." Gertrude and Paula were sentenced to life on May 25th of 1966. But in September of 1971, they were retried because their first trial was unfair. At this time, Paula had pled guilty to manslaughter and had ended up getting out of prison in December of 1972. She was put on parole, and by 1974, she was completely free. She had given up her baby, her little girl, that she had in 1966, the one that she was rumored to be pregnant with. She gave her up for adoption. She had moved to Iowa, changed her name, got married, had 2 more kids, and became a teacher's aide. Once it was discovered about her dirty past in 2012, she was fired from her teacher aide's job. Gertrude was charged with first-degree murder again and was sent to the Indiana Women's Correction Facility. It was here where they would describe her as a den mother. They said that she was the ideal prisoner. She was released in December of 1985. She ended up dying 5 years later of lung cancer. So Stephanie, Gertrude's second oldest daughter, turned into a state witness. Therefore, they did not charge her with anything. However, her boyfriend, who was constantly over at the house, did get sentenced to 2 years due to his roles in torturing Sylvia. Gertrude's other 4 children, John, Marie, Shirley, and James, they were not charged with anything, and they were placed in foster care until they could be reunited with their father. And the baby, Dennis Lee Jr., was also placed in foster care until his father could get him as well. And Richard had been sentenced to 2 years in prison. He ended up dying of lung cancer in 1972. There is a memorial set for Sylvia. It was created in 2011, and it sits a few miles from the house near Willard Park. This crime towards Sylvia is just unbelievable. Gertrude was a mother of 7. You would have thought she had a little bit more love in her heart, but she didn't. She was just a mean, bitter woman. Do your research if you're going to have somebody watch your kids. You can never be too cautious. I would never let my children out of my sight again. It's very scary, but be safe. Let me know what you think. And until then, I will see you next time. Bye.